The Early Weigh-In podcast is back, going down tomorrow night. UFC Vegas 100th event at the UFC Apex since the start of that. Now down to 11 fights. We've lost our co-main event, I think, twice now on the card, but not the best matchups, man. But we were talking before the podcast started, looking through them. I think we're live for a lot of finishes tomorrow night, so excited to see those, get into the fights with you. I know you didn't bet anything last week. I'll let you recap my card, though, where Mike Malott kind of screwed everything up for me, fighting much more patient, everything after what happened to him last time. It seemed like he brought out, much different game plan, didn't push the grappling or anything, didn't want to gas himself out, and ultimately not the best night for myself. I'll let you recap that real quick.
Yeah, you had two underdog shots for your straight bets. You had one on Jack Shore versus Yusuf Zalal. I mean, there was some top time for Jack Shore, but Yusuf just with his scrambles was able to get it out, and then that knee up the middle was pretty nasty. Rodrigo Nascimento. Now, I didn't make any bets, but I would have been 3 units in the hole as well because I was about to play all of that on Rodrigo Nascimento. I'm still looking for the opportunity to fade Romanov, and I'm pretty sure his contract ended after that fight. So I'm hoping the UFC re-signs him. I don't know. I like fading him, but he's gotten me the last few times. And then, like you said, touched on with the Mike Malott fight, after getting knocked out, he certainly slowed down. Or after getting finished, he certainly slowed down, changed his game a little bit. And for what it's worth, he's still like a pretty decent contender in the division as long as he can keep his head on straight, keep that fight IQ. He's still dangerous. Minus 3.5 units for you. And, yeah, like I said, I would have been in the negative too if I had put in my bets before the wedding. Okay, we are starting off the night in the bantamweight division with Melissa Mullins taking on Claudia Saigola. Don't know much about Claudia. Doesn't look like she is that great of a fighter, if I'm being honest. She had I think a 5-4 amateur record, getting finished by submission a few times in both her amateur and professional career. The girls that she's fought are inexperienced as well. I look over at Melissa Mullins. Now, Mullins, not the best showing in her first fight. She came in overweight against Nora Cornoli, couldn't find the takedowns, and ended up getting finished by Nora. I think she's a decent fighter. She probably deserves to be in the UFC. She's never going to touch gold, but I do think that she's rightful to be on the roster, and I don't feel the same about Saigola. I don't know enough about these two to really feel confident betting anything too much, but I do think that there's probably some good finishing props for Melissa Mullins, but that would be the only way that I touched it, and it'd have to be a good number.
Yeah, I like Melissa Mullins quite a bit. I think she's actually – I don't want to say you could ever price her higher just because it's a female fight, but I think she's 2-1 favorite clear here, man. For me, I'm not impressed with what I watched from Claudia as well. I think she likes to spend a lot of time doing some grappling, and I think she's significantly the worst grappler here by a long shot. I think Melissa Mullins is going to find a lot of top time in this fight, and it's whether or not Claudia's going to be able to stay safe. Melissa Mullins sub props was like plus 900 on FanDuel, plus 1,000 on DK. They've both been hit down $1 to 800 and 900, which I'm still going to roll the dice with, man, because I see a lot of top time here, and I just think the experience is just much different. I think Melissa Mullins is pretty legit on the mat, and I think she's going to lock up a submission sometime here, man. So I like Melissa Mullins quite a bit. I do think she's going to finish like plus 240, something like that inside the distance. I think an awesome look as well. Moving up to 185, Tresean Gore taking on Antonio Tricoli. Tresean Gore's been out for, I think, going on 2 years or right over 2 years at this point, dealt with a couple different injuries. But, depending on the severity of those injuries and how long it actually sidelined him each time, 2 years off for somebody who's 4-2 with as inexperienced as he was could prove a career saver for him, because I think he was quite honestly signed a little bit too early in the UFC. I don't think he was going to do too well. I'm not a big fan of his game. Just not a lot of volume there. But as far as basics go, pretty decent jab. And in this fight, I think he's going to have a huge athleticism, just speed and power advantage while this fight's on the feet. But I also think he could find himself in deep shit if Antonio finds a way to get on top of him. He's a much bigger fighter here. I think he's the much more talented grappler of the two. And I kind of lean dog or pass. Trayshawn Gore's not someone that I could bet at minus 180, minus 190. So it's dog or pass to me. I always kind of lean toward the guy who could, get it down to the mat as well and look a clear favorite. But I'm not too confident on either side. I'll take Antonio Tricoli, side with the underdog. I think that's where the value is.
Yeah, so if this wasn't Trayshawn Gore coming off the 2-year layoff, I do think it'd be a pretty easy pick for me to just ride with him, even at the current number. But that does leave a big question mark surrounding him. He hasn't had that many good wins in the UFC. He's lost to even worse guys, and it's really tough to trust him with Tricoli. It seems like the UFC doesn't care about his general safety. They tried to book him up against Omar Sy, Ikram Aliskerov, and then last minute switch him off to Shara Bullet.
Yeah,
I think that they enjoy watching him lose, and he's kind of been the nail to most guys. If there was a bounce back fight for somebody like Trayshawn Gore, this would be it. So I do think that I'll be siding with him, but it's not with any confidence at all. This is for fighting for pink slips here. Give me Trayshawn Gore. You touched on the jab. I think even if it stays on the feet, he could probably pump that out for 15 minutes. And if he winds up on top, he could kill some time there as well. So give me Trayshawn over Tricoli. Let's see, moving up the card to the bantamweight division, Cody Stamann taking on Damon Blackshear. Man, dude, I would definitely be on Cody Stamann here if I hadn't just bet him at the exact same number against Taylor Lapilus. It's just giving me flashbacks. He did not look great. I thought he looked a little bit of a shell of himself. It looks like he hadn't really evolved his game since he's been in the UFC. He's still kind of stuck in 2013, if you ask me. He really hasn't developed any, and it's not what you want to see from a 35-year-old 135er.
Yeah.
Damon Blackshear, he's getting overpriced, I know he is. He constantly is, honestly. But I think that this is a really good fight for him. This is probably a great bounce back fight. You look at Mario Bautista, I think he's second in the division for most consecutive wins. And then Montel Jackson, who's one of those guys who could be a champion on a given night. It's just, his fight IQ that'll get him in trouble. What I have seen from Damon Blackshear is a win over Jose Johnson. Jose Johnson is no slouch. In that Fareed Basharat fight, he looked good early. Fareed ended up beating him down. I think that he has all the tools to be a competitor at 135 pounds. And just with the decline that I've seen from Cody Stamann, I can't get behind it. So give me Damon Blackshear. I think the fight's going to be close, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Damon won a 29-28. Maybe Cody steals around with some cage pressure.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. I feel pretty clear that Damon's going to win the fight, just not in love with the price tag. I 100% agree with you about Cody not really evolving. It's just kind of always been a wrestle boxer who's a little too short to get on the inside and land his boxing, and honestly doesn't wrestle as much as he probably should in some fights. And he's a hard guy to back. I also bet him at plus 200 against Taylor Lapilus. And you're right. While Taylor Lapilus is a very good counter striker, very good patient using the range, Cody just didn't look himself that night. And I think Damon a little bit, hits harder, a little bit more athletic, a little bit quicker, should probably fend off the takedowns and win in the stand-up. So I'm on the Blackshear side, just not in love with the minus 270. Moving up to 170, Charles Radke versus Matthew Semelsberger. Could be a car crash, man. Both of them are willing to bang. They both have some pretty slick boxing. I think Radke probably has the more technical, slicker boxing, really clean left hook, while Matthew probably has the power advantage. He can set guys down with his shots. His fight IQ, though, not very high. He typically hadn't really capitalized the way he should on all these knockdowns. His defensive grappling is pretty weak. And, I see a lot of people saying that that's probably a path Charles Radke, should and could take. And I definitely think it's a path he should take. I just don't know how successful with it. I watched back that Blood Diamond fight, and I just wasn't as impressed in the ability to get Blood Diamond down as I would have wanted to coming, thinking that he should be able to grapple in this fight. So I'm off the Chuck Buffalo side, even though I think he's still the pick for me. I think it's just a super close fight. Could be a car crash. Could be who lands first. And I don't know, man. Yeah, line could be wide at the end of the day, but give me Chuck Buffalo.
Yeah, pretty similar theme throughout these first few fights. It's sketchy favorites that I don't really want to back, but I would agree that I think Chuck Buffalo has a pretty decent path here. Semmelsberger is consistently hurting his opponents and then not being able to finish and then blowing his gas tank. And I feel like Prates' knee to the stomach was not a fluke, but I just think that Prates was so much better in the striking. I don't think that we're going to get that here. I don't think Radke's going to fall or crumble early. And if he can withstand that early pressure of Semmelsberger, I think Radke's boxing, especially like you touched on that left hook, will find the chin of Semmelsberger over the course of 15 minutes, especially if he can keep it on the feet and just wear him down at the beginning. I think that'll all play into his game plan. So, yeah, give me Charles Radke. I don't love laying a juice price tag on him. He's one of those guys I enjoy backing as a dog. So it's a layoff spot for me for sure. Let's see. Moving up the card, we have Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Zach Scroggin. I don't know, another setup fight, man. Like as far as winnable fights for the 37-year-old Zaleski dos Santos, this is a really good matchup for him. He's coming off of a loss to Randy Brown. Zach Scroggin, undefeated, but not sure that any of his opponents would ever even come close to the contender series, much less make it into the UFC. So he's a can crusher. I think he's probably in over his head here. We haven't seen him lose, and I do feel like he's about to get squashed. The only kind of offline for me is Zaleski dos Santos by submission at plus 550. He's a Brazilian black belt, and it's a squash match. This dude's really, really tall, and I've made this bet consistently. Like if there is a guy who has a grappling path against a really tall fighter, they usually don't like to stand and trade with somebody with that much length. I think he's going to get on the inside, get him to the ground, and if he doesn't finish him with the ground and pound, we'll probably see the Scroggins end up turning over, giving up his neck, and we'll see a sub hit at plus 550. You can probably bank on me putting 0.5 on that.
I dug around on the Scroggins just a little bit here. Miles Johns is a Trey Ogden guy, and so is Zach Scroggins. So I don't know. I think might have been out here this week or something like that. I think he's a can crusher, like you said. Pretty decent grappler, but I don't think he's going to have any success grappling against Zaleski dos Santos and on the feet. I also think it's night and day. I more or less do favor the knockout on the feet. I think Zaleski's a little bit too tall. We'll see a guy with 7 fights come in here under the bright lights, show some tall man defense, probably get knocked out, maybe pretty violently, honestly. I think Zaleski probably finishes him under 7.5 minutes. Feel pretty confident about it. Pretty solid fight coming up, man. Cortavius Romeus taking on Gaston Bolaños. I think this fight's going to finish under 2.5 rounds. Looking to try to get that somewhere on the card. Cortavius, I think, has a massive grappling path here. I think if he gets on top, he's liable to finish this fight by submission pretty quickly. He's also just super athletic, swings big, and could hurt Bolaños on the feet. I ultimately think Romeus, while he carries a very muscled up frame, I do think his size will get him in trouble as he tries to climb the ranks of bantamweight. He does more look like a flyweight to me. Pretty short. On the Bolaños side, pretty decent striker. Honestly, I feel like he's the much better striker of the two in terms of technicality and carries pretty decent power. Not really sold on the defense or the chin of Romeus. So I think Gaston's going to have his openings while this fight's on the feet to land something big. And I like Romeus' chances of finishing on the mat. So I do like this fight to finish. Feel pretty confident about that. And I kind of leaned Bolaños earlier in the week, man. But the more I kind of dug around, watched a couple fights, I think Romeus grappling probably going to be a little bit too much, man. So give me Cortavius Romeus by submission. I see it going down.
Yeah, so it's just another guy I don't want to bet at a favorite price tag. Cornelius looks all right, super athletic, but I do think he's a little overhyped. We did see him get dropped by what's his face, Ramon Tavares in 20 seconds, and I think Bolaños has just as much of an opportunity for that. He's a world champion kickboxer. He's good on the feet. Probably tears him up if the fight stays standing. Cornelius, I'm not sure if he's going to continue to go for the wrestling if he doesn't get it early. What are you laughing at?
It's Cortavius. You say
Oh,
Cornelius.
Cortavius. Oh, cool. Yeah. Cortavius Ramios, whatever. Cortavius, I'm not sure that he's going to continue to go to the well if he doesn't get the takedowns early. And if he's on the feet, he's in trouble. So it's a pass fight for me, but I do think that Bolaños is a live underdog. As far as a bet, though, yeah, I'll take Cortavius. I see why you think the under is going to hit. I actually didn't hear what you thought Cortavius, how he would finish if he does. Do you think he subs him or?
Yeah, I think it's sub.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
Minus 155.
Value wise, I'm taking Bolaños, but I guess pick wise, I'm taking Cortavius. What were you saying?
Under 2.5, minus 155. DraftKings. Don't think it's a bad line.
I don't hate that at all, actually. Moving on to the prelim main event, Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Denise Gomes. Denise Gomes, she is coming off that split over Eduardo Mora. We did kind of see her ceiling, in my opinion, against Angela Hill. Hill was able to expose some of the holes in her game, just using that vet savviness. And let's see, Karolina, old, doesn't take punches very well, and she's up against a power puncher here. It could look really bad, but I do think that there's a little bit of potential for Kowalkiewicz to slow down the pace, maybe drain the power out of Gomes over 15 minutes. But it's going to be a really scary fight for her. I know she's avoided getting finished since Jessica Andrade, but this is probably up there with some of the biggest power punchers that she's faced since Jessica. So if she's not able to stay safe for 15 minutes, push her up against the cage, there's probably going to be some finishing opportunity for Gomes, and I'd be a little worried for Kowalkiewicz. Gomes is the pick. Not really sure how I'm going to attack it, though.
Yeah, I feel like maybe Carolina live could potentially be the way to go if we see Denise slowing down, because I really do think that's probably the only way Carolina wins this fight, man. I think at least in the first round it's going to heavily swing in the favor of Denise Gomes. I think at 24 years old, there's tons of room for improvement. I think she's much faster. She hits much harder. I think there's grappling upside for her. It's just really how long is she going to be able to put it together? And if Carolina's still there come late in round two, do the tide start to swing and stuff? So I'm not counting Carolina out, but I'm necessarily not really interested in betting her pre-fight here just because I do think things are going to swing Denise Gomes' way pretty heavily in the start of this fight. So I like Denise Gomes, man. And honestly, I was just looking at it a second ago. It's plus 200 for an under 2.5, probably at least plus 160 for doesn't go the distance. And while that might just really favor the Gomes side, at 40 years old, man, Carolina's very liable to get finished by one of these young girls here again soon.
Equally as enticing line for me, Kowalkiewicz decision only money line at plus 330. I mean, like that's still a pretty good number, and I think that's her path to victory if she is able to, hold her against the cage. So that's something that I'm looking at as well.
I dig that. Hopefully still kicking off the main card. Maybe they switch things up a little bit, but man, I think this is a killer fight. Mansour Abdul-Malik taking on Disco Todorovic. I think Mansour has potential to be one of the best contender series guys in a minute in terms of athleticism, frame, a wrestling background and where he trains. The dude looks legit, has all the qualities to become a great fighter, man. Again, has a small wrestling background, hits like a truck. The one thing is, and I know he finished the Wes Schultz fight late in 2 or in 3, but Wes Schultz also slowed down. I'm worried about somebody who can take Mansour up front and still have the cardio and pace to go late. I don't know if that's Dusko, man, coming off like 2 ACL tears, leaves his hands down, chin up in the air, been TKO'd. I think his chin's a little bit wobbly, and I don't know, man. I feel like this is the fight to get Mansour a knockout get him showcased. I like Mansour here, but I guess kind of like KK, maybe Dusko if he's still there late in the second round, maybe over 1.5 if he's still there. Maybe you try to get on him live, but I like Mansour to either knock him out on the feet or take him down and finish him with ground and pound. Feel pretty confident about that. I like Mansour as a prospect in general.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think Dusko is a little bit of a glutton for punishment, man. He likes to lead with his head whenever he's striking and doesn't have the greatest chin. So it's not the best strategy for what he brings to the table. And Mansour, yeah, he hits really hard. Like you said, I do think that his path to victory is to get the takedown. Dusko's had trouble with that his whole career. Again, this is kind of another one where I feel like the sub is probably the most offline. If we can all agree he's going to get him to the ground, but Dusko's never been subbed, so I get why the line's like that. But Mansour has finished a submission in his career before, and I do think that this is a bit of a squash match, so at least something to keep an eye out on. My pick is also Mansour. Moving up the card to the strawweight division, Luana Pinheiro taking on Jillian Robertson. Luana's had a tough run past few fights. Angela Hill choked her out, and then Amanda Hebus knocked her out. Even before that, she was edging out split decisions. Haven't ever been super impressed with her. She's super pretty, but I think skill-wise, she's pretty lacking. Jillian Robertson, one of the best finishers in the women's division. I think she's got the most subs in 115 history. And I do think that she is live to find another one here. She's really heavy whenever she gets on top. She's a few inches taller, just in a better point in her career, still under 30 years old and improving every fight. I do think that she is the truth. I like her a lot, actually. And I think that she's probably going to be gunning for that finish after the Watterson fight, where she, had her dead to rights a few times and just couldn't get it done. That was super frustrating. I'm pretty sure I bet her inside the distance there, and I do think that she finds that this fight. So give me Jillian Robertson inside the distance.
Yeah, there's a few aspects of Jillian's game that she could round out. A little bit on the feet, get the wrestling a little bit better. But I think at 115, I think she's liable to be a real problem for the division, man. I think she's very physically strong, and when she gets on top of you, I think it's a different level than a lot of these girls are experienced. I think she's a very talented submission artist, and you see the Polyana Vienna fight, and the Watterson. She's not afraid to get on top and really beat you down, rain a bunch of ground and pound to open up those submissions. I think Jillian's a very dangerous girl, and Luana has about 4 minutes to knock her out or pull a guillotine or something. Or I think the grappling is going to slow her down, man. She's already someone who's never had an impressive gas tank as it is, and someone who pushes the grappling pace like Jillian. If she's made to grapple, I do think after the first round, she's going to slow down significantly, and Jillian's going to find her way on top and find another finish, man. I like Jillian Robertson here as well. Now the co-main event of the night, Gerald Meerschaert versus Rainer de Ritter. And if you're asking me, honestly, I know we've lost, Miles Johns and No Love, but we also lost. I thought there was something else that was scheduled to be the co-main at one time. I think this should have been, Tercios and Sopaj. I think GM3 and Rainer de Ritter probably should have been the co-main all along. This is a pretty solid-ass fight in my eyes. Rainer de Ritter kind of lost a little bit of his hype over at one, but you and I used to kind of watch him, get a little hyped up about him. Pretty talented grappler when he gets guys down to the mat. I think that's absolutely where he does his best work. But truth be told, on the feet, I don't really like what I see from him. And his last fight against the heavyweight guy, not getting up and sitting on the mat, man. No other words other than just quitting on himself. It's hard to ever really lay any chalk on him because Gerald's not going to quit on himself. If you're going to have to put him away, and if I think Gerald has the striking advantage and really isn't liable to get knocked out here, I think I don't know, man. I just don't think if the fight gets down to the mat, Gerald's that liable to get subbed. And de Ritter just made his first cut to 185, he said, in over 6 years or something. So, how's his body going to perform when this fight gets late? Gerald makes a living off of submitting guys late. So, Gerald submission prop, I think, is plus 500 or something like that. I don't know. I feel like it's one of those when the dude has 30 submissions and you still get plus 500, you should roll the dice on it. So maybe Gerald or Meerschaert money line, Gerald Meerschaert sub. I think he's a live dog, man. I'll take Meerschaert.
Yeah. So Ritter, we did used to watch him, but I've always kind of shit on Ritter. He's one of those guys in other organizations that get a lot of hype, and I think will absolutely fold whenever they get to the UFC. Similar to, who is that dude? Jason Jackson, Ramazan Kuramagomedov. That guy too. It was like he would make waves in the UFC, be ranked in the UFC. I don't feel the same about De Ritter. I think that he's made a living squashing people, and even if he wins this fight, I do think that he's pretty limited in the division. Gerald Meerschaert, like he touched on, he's able to really capitalize on people who are willing to engage in the grappling. His MMA grappling is so much better than even people who are pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, just because he's able to incorporate some strikes on the ground, some sweeps, and everything else. He's really knowledgeable if you're willing to engage with him. Working in favor of De Ritter, though, is he has lasted 10 minutes with Tai Rotolo, who I hold super high. I love the Rotolo brothers, and I think if 10 minutes on the mat with him and not getting subbed is enough for me to believe that you're not going to get subbed by Gerald Meerschaert. So, yeah, I think that he probably wins this one. Then they give him, like Paul Craig next, a very similar fight, but just another winnable fight for him. And then he gets fraud checked right after that. So give me De Ritter right here. But I'm not like super high on him, to be honest with you. I am excited to see him in the mix, though, with the UFC guys for sure. Moving on to the main event, we have in the welterweight division, Neil Magny taking on Carlos Prates. Prates kind of taking the UFC by storm. Pretty cool dude. Let's see. Saw him in Louisville when he knocked out Radke. That was a pretty tough one, dude. I've had a couple units on Radke, and Prates is pretty legit, dude. Like, as long as he can stay on the feet, I think that he is, maybe the best striker in the division. He's up there. I'd love to see him versus Ian Gary. Him versus Michael Morales would be another good fight. He might have to worry about some grappling. There is a world where Neil Magny does go in there, put on his singlet, and shoot for double legs, but I'm not too sure, man. Carlos Prates, he is not rushed at all when he's fighting, and I think that that's really going to work in his favor here. He's more than happy to fill you out for the first 5 minutes and then start to take over, and we've seen that in a few of his fights. His piston of a right hand is insane. He's got hard leg kicks, and I do think that that's going to chip away at Neil Magny. We've seen a couple of performances from Magny where he just kind of wilts, and Prates seems like the hammer that would be willing to do that to Neil Magny. And while the line is just, absolutely insane, I do think that we see Prates break down Neil Magny, and probably before the end of the third round. Leg kicks will set it up, and then he'll fold to a straight left, something like that. Give me Prates here. The line's absurd, and we talked about it this week. It's really tough to pass up plus 550 on Neil Magny. Yeah. So, I'm not saying that there won't be 0.5 on Neil Magny, but I don't think he has too much of a chance unless he comes out here and shoots for a takedown early, tries to steal some of that heat out of Carlos Prates, because he's on one right now.
Yeah, man. I kind of like you even touched on it, kind of like I talk about Sean O'Malley. If takedowns weren't a thing, he probably might beat everybody in the fucking division, man. I'm as sold on Carlos Prates on the feet as anybody. You've seen head kick finishes, knee finishes, left hand finishes. I mean, Mitch Ramirez, Li Jingliang never even been stopped before, on the feet, and ran through them both. I mean, I'm more than impressed. Huge frame, absolutely deadly Muay Thai. What I'm worried about is the same thing. What if there's some grappling here? What if this fight does get into the championship rounds? He is out there smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey. Wonder wonder what happens if he doesn't get the finish in 15 minutes. And those are questions to be answered. And with no Magny, man, the leg kick's always been an Achilles heel for him. Somebody as sharp as Prates on the feet coming from somewhere like Fight Nerds, who's just on an absolute tear right now. I expect him to have leg kicks in the game plan, but Magny does a really good job of making you fight his type of fight, grabbing the arms, forcing the clinch, fighting on the cage. And he's got an incredible gas tank that you can always guarantee will be there for 25 minutes. But I don't know, man. I might have 0.5 units on a Magny plus 550 because you almost have to, but I don't know. I think Prates is going to finish him in the first 2 rounds as well and set up hopefully a really good fight. I like what I see from Carlos Prates, man. Super impressed. Any last thoughts? Anything else?
Nah, I don't have much. I'm excited for the John Jones next week. That's what I'm looking forward to.
And if he retires, at least we can say we got to see the GOAT fight live,
I was about to say, we've seen him fight live. We're seeing him fight again 10 years later after seeing him become champion. We're still watching him fight. That's super cool. So
yeah, man. So UFC Vegas 100, hopefully maybe the last Apex event. It would be nice to go back to some crowds. But yeah, man, 209 Madison Square Garden next week. Can't wait to break that down. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see y'all then.
Peace.